So Debbie and Valerie, I know there's a lot of people that are looking at this particular video right now that really are either dealers right now themselves or possibly becoming a dealer, and they're wondering, wow, what's involved in this? And y'all, both Debbie and Valerie, did a great job of really helping drill down on insurance, even things that I haven't known being in the industry for a long time. Let me just ask some things that I might ask if I were a new dealer coming into this, or a seasoned dealer trying to move along. And feel free, either one of you, to answer it. Whoever, look at each other, just tell who's going to answer it. But first question might be, what age driver can drive on a dealer tag? You get a lot of younger people that are coming into this industry that might be 18 or 19.
No.
Can they do it or not? That's
No.
a common, okay.
21 to buy a policy on your own as a dealer, and if you're going to put your teenage son or daughter on your policy, then yes, that would have to be approved, and that's a special situation.
Does that really increase the cost a lot to put, say for instance, I've got a 22-year-old and an 18-year-old. They are members of my LLC. They are physical owners of the business. How is it a big jump?
Well, I would answer that like if I was your personal insurance agent and you're coming to me adding your 17-year-old, I would say, sit down. So yes, it's a very large jump because they do not have the experience, and we are talking about business insurance.
Correct. Okay, great. Well, thank you. Also, do the people that are getting the insurance have to be an owner or full-time employee of the company, or can they just be part-time drivers?
Are you talking about listed as a driver?
Listed, correct.
Right.
You can have part-time drivers. All owners have to be disclosed on the insurance application. Anybody that's working for you, whether they work one day a week or they only go to the auction once a month and pick up a car, they need to be listed on your application. It doesn't matter 40
But you need
hours.
to let them know. You need to let them know it's
20 hours a week.
part-time because there's a different rate for a part-time driver.
Yes, somebody who works just your front desk as a clerk has a different rate than somebody who is a full-time driver. That's all they do is just to and from the auction.
Okay,
So that's why we'll ask for a list of employees and what their job descriptions
And
are.
what their position is.
Good. So I'm assuming, of course you should never assume, but I'm assuming that the insurance goes up with more tags or more people.
Correct.
Okay, so if you have the standard 3 tags that the board issues you or the Department of Revenue issues you when you first get your dealer's license, and those 3 tags are going to be less expensive than if you, say, start to sell a lot of cars and now you have 5, 6, 7, 8 tags.
Depending on the insurance carrier, tags cost generally anywhere from $50 to $75 additional
charge. Yeah.
for additional tag. But now drivers, that's another story. And again, we'll go back to your personal auto policy. And if you're adding a driver to your personal auto policy, there's always a charge. So it works the same way with business. And we'll assume that your driver is going to be a clean driver, no tickets and no accidents. That's generally about a $900 charge for the year to add a driver.
And we don't want to scare people away from adding drivers because it's important that those drivers are on your policy. Because if you have somebody that works for you and they've gotten into an accident, you can potentially reduce your coverage or null and void it altogether.
By not having them on the policy.
Correct. If you have a driver that works for you, and they can tell based on where the accident is, if it's a test drive or somebody who's driving back from the auction, that could potentially, null and void your coverage or reduce your coverage. So it's important that even though there is a charge for a driver, it's because they're providing coverage for that driver, and we need that. We want that coverage.
And remember, it's included in your 25% and 10 equal payments, so it's affordable.
Yes.
That's good. Well, I appreciate that. I've seen this asked of students and everything else as I've been teaching them. Can I just put a dealer tag on my personal car and drive it?
No.
No. Do we even need to say anything else? No.
Going back to what we talked about, the LLC, this policy is insuring the LLC. So if you're driving a personal car that's not owned as a part of your inventory, then this policy doesn't provide coverage for it. So whether you take your friend's car, your personal car, whatever car, it's not providing coverage for it.
You literally would have to buy the car and make it part of the LLC.
Part of your inventory.
Good. Thank you for clearing that up because we do have people that ask that all the time.
Yes.
No.
We do too.
And I know you covered this. I just want to make sure we go ahead and really cement this. So I know you talked about the form that the state needs, and that is called the Accord form, which it's a one-page listing of the coverage that is required. You said that even though it's emailed, it does become part of an original, quote, original piece of paper. I just want to clarify that and say that is how it is, right? So it can be emailed.
Once it's printed off, once the certificate is printed off, it becomes a legal document that you can send to the state, yes.
Yes.
Same with the fleet ID card. Once it's printed off, or you can keep your fleet ID card, I guess, in your wallet, in your phone if you want to. I do not suggest doing that. I would suggest printing that off and showing it to an officer if you have to.
Okay, great. But they can't get an email. They don't have to wait for the mail to
It
come
is
in.
the original.
It's the original.
That is the original one. It has our signature on it. It has our timestamp on it. It lists out all your coverages. It's got the state board's name on it. That is your original to keep in your file and to mail to the state.
Okay, great. What about it? Is there a difference in costs based on where my office is located, like Gainesville or Cobb County or DeKalb?
Yes. Just like comparing insurance from Georgia to New York. New York is about 5 times more expensive than Georgia. So Atlanta is way more expensive than Noonan.
Okay.
So yes, your zip code, where your office is, determines part of your rate. Yes, correct.
You brought up New York. That's a great place. I want to ask you this question. We get a lot of students that come through from other states that are becoming Georgia dealers, but they live in New York or they live in Pennsylvania or New Jersey. Okay, they can get insurance, right?
Okay, that's a yes and that's a no.
Okay.
So let's start with the yes. If they have a Georgia driver's license and a Georgia location, Georgia
Okay.
home location. Now, if they don't, then none of the carriers will give a quote.
Okay, and that's a great point because I do have them coming through class a lot that basically say, oh, well, it's fine because I can get my dealer's license, which you actually can get a dealer's license in the state of Georgia, but you can't get tags and you can't get insurance. And I want to make sure we clarify that for out-of-state people.
Right, you have to have a Georgia license and live in Georgia.
Okay, great. What do you think? Well, I know you covered this already, but so the average cost, you've mentioned that and how they can upgrade and all that kind of stuff. What do you usually recommend? You guys have been in this business a long time and you see people, and we're not trying to sway anybody one way or the other, but on your experience, because you guys deal with the claims,
I have a great example for this.
what do you think?
We'll let Valerie take it and then I'll finish it.
I have a great example for this one. They're very affordable policies, whether you pick the basic or the broad. Me personally, I've seen too many claims happen where $125,000, whether it's personal or business, it's just not enough coverage. For example, one of my brokers came to me last year. I wasn't his agent at the time, but he was a new startup and his agent sold him a $125,000 liability policy, the state minimum. About 3 weeks later, one of his drivers got into a bad accident in which he hit a vehicle that had 4 people in it. All 4 people were injured. All 4 people went to the hospital. Next thing he knows, he got suit papers. One was for his business, and it said that the claim has now gone well above and beyond the $125,000. I think it was like $250,000. And so he's calling me to get coverage because now
He has to get a new policy because that one's over with.
Correct.
Remember, it's over with.
he's eaten up his limits because now if he gets in another accident, there's no coverage. So it really left him in a pickle. And like he said, I didn't know I should have bought more coverage. That's why we always tell you you can increase coverage. That's why we always offer more coverage. Most people don't know. So I would say anytime you can buy more coverage, especially with liability, you should, especially with liability.
Yeah, maybe leave off all the optional coverages and take more liability. Because to go from $125,000 of liability to $300,000 is approximately $400 more. And again, 25% down and 10 if payments, so it becomes very affordable. So that would have helped in her case. Now, when someone asks me about liability, my first question is, what assets do you have? Because let's think worst case scenario. Let's think that it is the bad accident, and let's think someone is paralyzed for life. And I'm going to say that the courts do allow these LLCs and our Incs, our corporations, to be pierced. Yeah. If you didn't take enough liability insurance to now help this person out that's going to have a sip and blow chair. And so if you have a home that has equity in it, if you have other assets that have equity in it, then yes, they will come after those, and rightfully so. So those are the areas that you need to be concerned. And it's just there to protect you. It's not to make your policy more expensive. It's just there to protect your assets.
We hear a lot too. We hear a lot of rebuttal people say, "Oh, I don't have anything that they can take."
That's
But
not
you
true.
forget that in Georgia they can garnish your wages.
Yeah.
And I believe it's up to, and I'm not an attorney, but up to 7 years. That's a long time to have your wages garnished over an auto accident because we didn't take enough liability limit to
Yeah.
start with.
And I agree, I'm covered higher for the same reason, I don't want that to
And I
happen.
always like to say, I don't even think you could probably get an attorney to help you for a few $100s of that increase of taking your liability limit.
And that's another great point is that policy is there to protect you, and it's going to pay for your legal defense. Sometimes we get sued for things that aren't really our fault, but we still have to pay to be protected against the court and protected against another attorney. That's another reason why it's important to carry the proper limits.
That's great. Another question for you. So what happens if you guys are driving on a quote test drive? You all have seen the plastic dealer tags that dealers now have that the actual tops, which is a temporary operating permit, goes on for the 30 days that they have temporary tag usage. What if someone just writes test drive on it? Is that acceptable for the insurance company?
No, absolutely not. If someone's going to test drive your vehicle, it needs to be a dealer tag on your vehicle
Correct.
for coverage to be effective.
And it's good to point out that the insurance company is not going to insure somebody who knowingly committed fraud or did something illegal.
No, that's right.
So if that is illegal with the state of Georgia to write test
it
drive,
voids your policy.
then you potentially null and void your policy because we are not insuring illegal or fraudulent acts knowingly.
So,
Excellent.
no, don't
And
do that.
yes, that did happen this year. They were told, all police departments actually in the state were notified that those test drive tags are illegal. So thank you guys for clarifying that. How far can I go to auctions and be covered?
The policies are sold with, generally the policies are sold with a 200-mile radius. If you know that you're going to be going on a regular basis outside of that 200-mile radius, then your quote, you need to get a quote based on that. So let's say that you're always within your 200-mile radius and just this one blue moon you went to Florida and bought a car and had an accident. All that will be discovered and you should be okay. You see, I said should be okay.
Right.
But if they're looking at your inventory and they see that you've been on a regular basis going back to Florida or going back and forth to New Jersey, then you very well could possibly avoid your coverage.
Okay. This is another thing that I know you guys ask is this car being used for personal use or is it being used for transport only? What's the difference?
Go ahead.
Well, it's important that if you have, a lot of dealers have trucks that they use to go pick up vehicles from the auction with, it's important to discuss that with your agent, with your insurance agent, what the vehicle is for. Also, if you're using it for personal use, maybe you're letting your wife drive it or a child, we talked about that earlier. It's important that number one, those drivers are on the policy, and number two, that the coverage is there. Because if you're using it for personal use, and you haven't disclosed it to the insurance company, meaning they're not making a charge for personal use, then that will reduce your coverage, or even with some carriers, cancel your coverage, null and void your coverage. So it's important that you discuss with us what those vehicles are, and that's why we ask up front. Do you have personal insurance? Do you have tow trucks? Do you have trucks that you go to and from the auction with? Those things aren't automatically covered on all policies.
And I think it's great to know that if you do have, say that you're using it for personal use, that you do have a right to drive it if you're a full-time employee or officer of the company or a listed driver, correct?
Yeah, let's be clear, yes. So you have two people involved, or two entities involved. You have the LLC or the corporation involved if there's an accident, and the driver. Now, the reason you want personal use on a policy is if you're driving your car owned by your LLC and you have an automobile accident, then the lawsuit will come to the LLC and the lawsuit's also going to come to the driver. So if you're not listed as personal use, then you would need to take that lawsuit and turn it over to your personal insurance carrier to defend you in that lawsuit. That's why you need to either buy personal use on your business dealership policy or make sure you maintain a personal auto policy at all times. Okay?
Good, okay. Generally, does someone come out from the insurance company to check your lot or your broker office? How does that work?
And when I laugh, I'm just laughing. You'll just have to cut this part. Yeah. Yes, someone will do an inspection, and maybe it's a phone inspection, but generally they come to your lot, to your office, and they just do an inspection.
They might take pictures, ask questions.
If you're a dealer with a physical lot with inventory, most definitely. But if you're a dealer in a suite, most of the time you'll get a phone call from the inspector, pretty much just going over the application that you've already gone over with us several times. So it should all be the same.
They just want to verify that what we've said on the application matches what you actually do.
Right.
And we've actually had someone from one of your
Yeah.
carriers come out and
Stop
they
by.
do take pictures and they do check it out, which is a good thing because they're making sure that you are truly in business and that you truly do have a location.
And I think they do a random audit.
Yeah,
with
but I think
pictures,
when they
not
see
everyone.
the suite over there at your location, I think they say, oh, well, this is another office suite. We've already been
Just
out there
depends.
once.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll just make a phone call.
But I just want to give new dealers, so they don't
Don't
get
be
scared.
surprised. Yeah, don't be surprised.
if they
And
come.
they usually identify themselves. I'm so and so with this insurance company, and then they look around, they make sure there's no hazards, and take pictures. And
So it's very important
Or do
when you
it
get
on
a
the
phone
phone.
call, when you get a phone call from the inspector, to call them back. That's very important because that will get your policy canceled if you do not call the inspector back.
correct.
Great, that's great advice. When you guys talked about the LLC or legal name, maybe give me an example of how that should read, because there's a lot of companies out there that, they want a name that's unavailable for the LLC. So we end up having to do something like Matt Enterprises LLC doing business as John's Used Cars. How should they submit their information to you when it's that name, for instance?
Just how you put it.
Yeah.
We got clarification from the carriers that they will do, Debbie Ward doing business as Debbie's Used Cars.
Right.
So they will do it that way.
But it's so important because if it goes down to the state and it's not listed that way,
Oh, it has to be listed exactly the way you're going to be doing business. Exactly.
Not just that, but if you had a bad claim, where your legal name, and you think, oh, well, it's just misspelled, or oh, they left off the period or something. No, that's important because once you get attorneys involved in a bad claim, something like that will null and void your policy. I mean, these are legal documents. It's important that it's correct. It's important if you have a DBA that's disclosed. Everything needs to be correct and accurate.
that's great. Thank you, Howard. What happens if, for instance, I hate to even bring me up, and we're not going to say who I am, but I had a very bad claim in the fact that I had a major fire in my facility, and I guess we talk about garage keeper liability being used primarily for dealer tax, but it's also used if the organization causes like the fire that burned down a building that was not mine.
Okay.
But my question is, how long before I can see a drop off or a return to somewhat normal rates where my rates went up by 70% or 80% per the carriers, because now I'm a high risk with because I had cars that burned up as well as my building, so it was a lot more than just your traditional one car accident, for instance. How long could a dealer who's experienced this, because we're sharing this with lots of dealers that have lots of experience, 20 years, 25 years, that are seeing this for continuing education purposes, for instance. How should they go about this? What are they looking at claim-wise time?
Right. When you're taking out an application, you will be asked about your claims, and your claims follow you currently up to 36 months. So if you have a claim that was 37 months, you don't have to disclose it. But the last 36 months, that will affect your rates.
3 years.
3 years.
I do think it's important to note, because Matt mentioned burning up the building. That's where we go back to the basic quote, and you go back to the broad quote. The basic quote, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, Debbie, doesn't include what we call fire damage or
Burning up the building.
Yeah, burning
So
up the
thank God
building.
I
Yeah.
did.
So
But
If
the
you're
full
getting-
quote, the full quote will give you up to
Typically, yes.
125,000 of burning
no,
up the
100.
building.
I believe it's 100.
It's 100,000. That's what I got.
Yeah, it's 100.
100. Okay. There you go.
But that's why
I
it's
put my
important.
disclaimer on here now.
It's important to discuss that with your agent, because when you're picking, whether you're going through us or maybe another agent or whatever, it's important to look at that, because when you're getting just basic liability, the state does not require that you carry all those things. So in Matt's case, you burn your building down.
You burn someone else's building.
Yeah, you
That's
burn
right.
somebody else's building down.
Then there's not gonna be coverage.
It would be a really bad day for you.
Yeah.
And your inventory coverage, you burned your cars and stuff. That's an important conversation
That's
to
a
have
good
with your
question.
agent.
Mhm.
Yeah, and again, that's why I want to make sure that dealers that have been in this business for a while need to know this.
It's called fire legal liability. If you don't own the building and you're a tenant in a building, it's called fire legal liability. Like the building, we are a tenant here, so we carry fire legal liability insurance.
Also, another thing, Debbie talked about your claims history and disclosing it. Unfortunately, they also don't just take our word for it when we say, oh, we haven't had any claims. There is what we call a loss run form.
Report.
Loss history claim report, but the insurance companies know it as a loss run. This is going to show all the years you've had coverage and any of the claims, as long as you've been with that carrier that you've had. That is required. So if you're not a new startup and you've been in business and like you've had
You're
claims,
required to get your loss history, your loss run report.
if we say you haven't had claims, we have to back it up.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they don't take our word for it.
But the carrier's only going to go back 36 months, or are they going to look at that lost claim
If
report for a
if
long
we
period?
send one and let's say there's a claim listed on there that's 3.5 years,
We'll mark through
we'll
it
work through
and
it
then-
more than 3 years old.
Yeah, exactly. But you can't do that.
Right.
We
do
don't
it.
do that.
Right.
And then talking about that fire legal liability insurance, I want you to know how affordable that is. That might be $100 or $150 again for the year,
Probably less.
25% down and 10 April payments.
Thank God I had it.
Yeah.
I can tell you
Very
that much right
affordable.
now. Thank God I had that. Okay, so for dealers that have been around a while, and again, we're talking not just to new students. A lot of this is new people. For instance, we're going to have this in areas where different people are going to see it, whether it be
Yeah.
the
Continuing education.
continuing education or whether it be the new dealer that's just coming in. But specifically for dealers that have been around for a while and have been in business for a while, what should they look at in regards to their insurance coverage when you guys do a review?
Well, first thing I ask for is we ask for a copy of the policy. And if you don't want to give us a copy of the policy, then right there, we just can't help you. Because to do a review, we have to see what you have, or what you think you have and you don't have. Then we will go over that list with you and then give recommendations. But generally, what we see is that people think they have full coverage and they have basic. People think they have fire legal for if they burn their building down and it was excluded. Or people think they have false pretense or flood insurance and it's excluded. And so we point those out and then we tell you how much it costs to add it in. And that's being an accredited advisor in insurance and a small business specialist. That's how we get to specialize in the used car dealer industry. We know your industry.
Excellent. Speaking of that, you guys know your industry. We get the students that come into the class or students that are interested in going into business and they're like, well, I'm just going to go with Geico or I'm going to go with my State Farm agent. Why is that a bad idea? I tell them it's a bad idea, but from your words, why is that a bad idea?
Would you like to think
Sure. Well, I think there's several reasons why it's a bad idea. The first being is there's only certain carriers that will take what we call used car dealerships in the insurance
Garage
industry.
policy.
We call it a garage policy. Your typical Progressive, Geico, State Farm, those are not designed for a garage policy in which what the state requires you to carry. The second thing that's important is if you go to an agent that is not knowledgeable or familiar, they won't even know that you don't have fire legal liability. They won't know that your policy excludes flood. They won't know that inventory is not automatically covered. Or maybe they don't know that when you drive for personal use and it's not listed, that drops your coverage down. Those are all things that we've been in the industry a very long time. We've done a lot of education. We've done used car dealers
You made it
now
a point
for
to know
many
the
years.
used car dealers industry.
And what your needs are. What your needs are with your personal insurance. Maybe you work out of your home. Maybe you sell cars out of your home. Do you have the right homeowner's insurance for that?
Do you have home business extension on that policy?
Correct. There's a lot of coverage gaps that could be there if you go with the wrong agent. Like the claim example I gave earlier where he was recommended $125,000. He ended up suing his agent because he said, unlike us, he wasn't provided many quotes. That's why we provide many quotes. We offer a service. Debbie goes over the policy in detail, goes over the application in detail. Coverage can be changed at any
Or
time.
one of our agents goes over it. But
Yeah.
another thing, you might want to hire an employee. So you would want to call us to get a workers' compensation quote. You don't have to because the law says only 3 in the state of Georgia through employees. But again, if you have one, you are responsible if something happens. Or you might want to talk about a personal umbrella because like she said, you're selling cars at your home, so there's different things that you need to do. So we specialize in the used car industry, and that way we can help you save money while taking important coverage.
Excellent. That's great advice. Difference between coverage for brokers versus a car lot. You know, you mentioned that.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that are different?
Well, I think the first thing would be is the company that you can go with. There are carriers that will not take, unfortunately, if you just have an office and a parking lot. They require that you have a physical lot location. So we like to describe it as we're driving down the street and you have the balloons and the signs, and I know that you're an actual dealership. Then they still have stipulations. Buy here, pay here. Do you have young people on your policy?
Do you have tickets or
Do you
accidents?
have tickets or accidents? All of them have stipulations. Are you transferring titles at the time that you're selling the car? Things like that. Coverage-wise, I would say we can still get you the same
It's
coverage,
the same coverage.
both policies, but it goes back to the question you asked about your agent. Your agent would have to know. So if I'm writing a policy for a broker, I know what that broker policy is going to offer, and I know how to describe it to the insured as to why this is different than a standard policy versus a non-standard policy. I think that goes back to your agent.
And then there's some carriers, right, that are going to require looking at your lot. For instance, if you are a dealer, how are you storing your cars? Are they behind a fence and things like that? Is that true? Or?
That's right. You would get a credit if your lot is fenced, not with poles, and I don't understand that, but a physical fence, a chain link fence.
Mm-hmm.
Also, they like a lot of dealers or insurance carriers like it if your vehicles are stored in a warehouse for obvious reasons. But we underwrite with about 12 different used car dealer insurance companies. Not all 12 are going to do brokers, and not all 12 are going to be competitive on if you have a lot. So we have to know which carriers are competitive in what situations. Like you asked me earlier, what about territories, or what about zones or cities? So each carrier has their own appetite, and that's up to us to be able to help you in that insurance review, picking the right carrier for the right price, for the right coverage.
Okay. Speaking of the carriers, one of the things that I've heard the term bantered around is a lot value. Why would a lot value of what your car is versus in repairs, why is that important?
Well, lot value is important because that's how you buy your inventory. So look out there on your lot, and it's not what you can sell it for, it's what you buy it for. So if you have 10 cars out there and they're all worth $10,000 that you bought them for, then you need to carry $100,000. And the lot value is bought in a block. So, and what I mean by that is if you buy $100,000 of inventory, then you could have 10 cars at $10,000, or you could have 5 cars at $25,000. You can have any combination that you want. You just can't go over the $100,000.
Okay.
Now, if you go over the $100,000 in the time of a claim, the adjuster is going to look at your inventory, and he's going to see that you bought a policy that said $100,000 maximum at any one time on your lot. However, at the time of the claim, you had $200,000. So he's going to take what you carried and divide it into what you should have carried, the $200,000. He'll come up with a fraction, and he's going to pay your claim based on that fraction.
And that happened to me.
So
That's why it's so important.
So it's very important that you carry the correct limit, because they want their premium for the correct limit. They want the correct premium for the correct exposure. Correct.
And that does also include, just to make sure we clarify with the dealers, that includes any repairs you made to the car too. They want to see that.
Correct.
Right. So the value
I was going
plus.
to add to Debbie's when he was
Okay.
talking about the lot value. There's a difference between what you pay for the car at the auction and what you sell it for off your lot.
Right.
If you're putting things into your cars, it's important to keep receipts and keep detailed books, so that in the event that car had a claim in it, but maybe you just put $500 worth of new tires on it, you could show that to the adjuster and show that here's my receipt for the mechanic work and everything I just put into this car that had a wreck, tomorrow.
Right.
And we're going to get a little technical here, but then you can buy limits of 60% of the repair, 80% of the repair, 90% of the repair, or 100%. So if you're buying 100% of any repair work you do on cars, obviously it's going to cost a lot more than if you just bought 60% of what the total repairs are to cars.
Right.
Okay.
But again, so and I just want to clarify, this isn't regarding liability. This is if you're having full coverage and you're buying inventory block.
What we call inventory coverage, lot coverage, comprehensive or
Full
collision
coverage.
coverage.
Full coverage.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. This is-
Okay, and they should really look, I think
Look
my
at their
rule,
books and see, do an average inventory every month and look
Every
and see,
month.
every month.
so you don't have a problem if I call you up and say, you know what, my inventory changed a lot, I need to up this to 150, or it's November and we're at the end of the year, I'm gonna pay personal property tax, so now I've only got $40,000 worth of cars on my lot, you should just,
Some carriers will allow us to do monthly reporting, where you
Okay.
can send in a monthly report. But for the startup used car dealer, or a dealer that might only have 50,000, let's just say 100,000 and below, we might not be able to get monthly reporting. They're gonna expect you to buy a limit, a maximum limit, and then you live with it within the
That's your
12-month
plan.
for
period.
the 12-month
Yeah.
period, okay,
Yeah.
that's good to know. What should a dealer do if a customer has an accident while test driving a vehicle?
I think it starts with before the test drive. Did you get a copy of their driver's license and a copy of their ID card? Did you make sure
Your
that
insurance ID card.
that they had insurance? Per your policy, you were to call your agent and report that claim. You're supposed to report all claims, whether it's your fault or not your fault. And then I would go ahead and report the claim to the insurance company, not me as your agent, but you, the person that owns the business, report it to that person's insurance company that was test driving. Go ahead and do that. Call the police. Have a police report made. I can't stress that enough. Anytime there's an accident, whether parking lot, I know a lot of times
Whether
they
it's
say
a parking lot or not,
police don't
call
come.
the police
always call the police
so
and,
that you have
and
a
make a
report.
report. Yeah.
We have seen many times when people elect not to call the police in a parking lot, then the other person changes the story. And then you have nothing to back anything up. You have no report or anything. And it looks like it's your fault. I'm going to go back to what Valerie said before the accident is what's important. Meet with an attorney. We're not attorneys. Meet with an attorney and have an attorney go ahead and draw you up a simple form that anyone that's going to test drive your car that would sign this form, and it's going to make them responsible for wrecking your car. Okay? And get a copy of their insurance and a copy of their driver's license. And because you have that form there signed, then with that accident, you might not be carrying full coverage. You might just be carrying basic coverage. You could take this, turn it into their insurance, and because they signed it and it was done by an attorney, making it as legal as the law can allow, then you've transferred the risk to their insurance company.
That's great. Now, what if it's a first-time driver that doesn't have insurance? They're buying their first car.
Wow, I'll be very skeptical of that. And you look at your car and you say to yourself, there goes $5,000, I'm gonna let this run out there on the road.
And that's, I think that gets, you guys, thank you so much. You've answered so many questions, and I think this has been helpful, this question and answer time. But last question I have is, should the dealer be in the car if the customer's test driving?
Always.
Always.
You will null and void your coverage if Debbie's selling me a car and she's just driving around the block. And several reasons why. I could hit somebody from behind and just drive off. I could just drive off with the car and steal it. You have to always be in the car on a test drive. That's actually a question on your application. Are all test drives done with an employee present?
Then I will step a little bit into that legal department. And again, I am not a lawyer, but what you've done is you've just done gross negligence. You've allowed someone to drive your vehicle, and no matter what happens now, you are just as responsible as what happened.
And I teach all my students that same thing, and I say, do not let them drive the car without you being in it.
You have to be in it.
You've got $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 invested in this car. Do you really want somebody
Don't
to take
want
it
to
for a
sell
test
that
drive?
bad that you're going to allow someone to go out there with your company name and slam into somebody and kill them. And there, all you had to do was ask for a copy of their driver's license and their insurance card. Wait, they didn't have insurance. Why? Because they couldn't afford insurance. Why? Because of their prior driving record. You just solved yourself a whole problem.
Yeah.
See?
Wow. Debbie, Valerie, thank you guys so much. I think this is such an important part of our continuing education process that, insurance always boggles my mind too. And to have some experts like you guys take the time out of your day to educate either the new dealer or someone's been running a lot for a long time. I appreciate your time. I think it's been a fantastic amount of knowledge that's been we've given to the dealers, and again, thank you guys for your time.